at that point, I was, in a little better shape, but I was still pretty messed up. And, we had a good, frank discussion. I said to him, really, I'm here because I don't want anybody who's sitting in that's my seat to have that kind of injury ever again. I have my injuries. I'm going to have them for the rest of my life. But I want to make sure nobody else suffers at the stadium the way I did. And he said, well, what happened? I said, look, umbrellas block my view. And he didn't really understand. I said, I did a little research about umbrella policies around the league, and about a third of the league don't even allow umbrellas in the ballpark. I said he didn't even know his rules about umbrellas, but I said to him, the Yankees allow umbrellas, but only if they don't block somebody else's view. And I said, there was an usher stand. I was in the third row. There was an usher standing in the first row, not 6 feet away from me. And I said, he didn't stop anybody from opening their umbrellas. And I said, you just got to get rid of the umbrellas. And so he said he would consider that. He said it made perfect sense, and he was very sympathetic. And he said, is there anything else? I said, look, I've had probably $130,000 in medical bills to date. I'm a lucky guy. I have a good insurance policy, but it didn't cover it all. And there were about $25,000 that had come out of my pocket for all the tests, all the surgery, all the doctor's visits. And he said, fine, no problem. Send me the bills. I'll take care of it. So, I sort of walked out of that meeting room thinking, all right, the Yankees heard me. They're going to, take care of the umbrellas, and they'll take care of my medical bills. So about 2 months later, I hadn't heard from him, and finally I called him and got through, and he said, I spoke to my insurance folks, and they tell me I can't speak to you anymore. And I said, Randy, what do you mean? I mean, I thought we really had an understanding. He said, I can't speak to you anymore. And I said, well, what am I supposed to do about that? He said, well, you got to do what you got to do.
Let me interject something here. First of all, why they are contesting this is because on the back of a ticket, there's an assumption of risk doctrine. Just very briefly, it says, the fine print, the bearer of the ticket assumes all risk and danger incidental to the sport of baseball. But is there anything else that precludes Major League Baseball or individual teams from doing the right thing? We only have a couple minutes left.
Mm-hmm. Well, the baseball rule was adopted decades ago during the heyday of baseball, and it basically protects ballparks from owing just a limited duty of care to spectators so long as they exercise reasonable care and adequate protection. So in the old cases, they said reasonable care was just putting up nets behind home plate, where the courts said that's where the danger is the greatest. But as you know, things have changed a lot in baseball since the old large stadiums of yesteryear. Now we have these new intimate ballparks where fans are much more closer to the action and consequently more close to the danger. Pitchers are throwing at 100 miles per hour. Batters are stronger. Some of them are juiced on steroids, so they're even hitting the ball harder. There are maple bats that splinter like crazy. And, perhaps the most dangerous thing of all is the Wi-Fi in the ballparks and these jumbotron distractions. So people are getting distracted. The ball clubs want to be connected to their fans with the Wi-Fi. And so, it's on the one hand, and on the other hand, they want to say you got to keep your eye on the ball because that foul balls can come your way. So they can't really have it both ways, Ron. They got to, either they got to get rid of the Wi-Fi in the ballparks or they got to do something to protect the fans. And, at first I was just all about the umbrellas because that's what really, caused my injury. But as I came to realize how many people are getting hurt all over the league, on such a regular basis. Bloomberg News reports 1,750 people get hurt every year in ballparks. I said, you know what? I think baseball has to extend the nets. And so that's sort of, why I've become a public advocate for more fan safety and just encouraging injured fans and their families to speak up and trying to raise public awareness about this. Because, if a fan gets hurt in Boston and another one in Milwaukee and another one in San Diego, you can't really